I warned this would happen. Something that I said, and I've been saying for a couple of years ago, the International Holocaust Remembrance Association's working definition of anti-Semitism that is non-legally binding would eventually become legally binding and adopted into law in all of the countries, particularly in the West, that they have been going around talking to NGOs and businesses and government departments, getting them to adopt their definition of anti-Semitism. And the first indication we had of that was early this year when Kirsty Noem, the governor of South Dakota, wrote it into law there in that particular state. But yesterday, we hear that the House of Representatives in the USA, one of the two parts of Congress, have voted for Bill HR 6090, which is called the Antisemitism Awareness Act, which adopts the International Holocaust Remembrance Association's definition of anti-Semitism into law. It says here in the preamble, to provide for the consideration of a definition of anti-Semitism set forth by the IHRA for the enforcement of federal anti-discrimination laws concerning education programs or activities and for other purposes. So it's been said this is only for campuses as a reaction to what has been going on with the anti-genocide rallies being taken over and infiltrated by the Soros crowd and money to discredit the anti-genocide movement on student campuses. We know that. That's what they do. But it also says for other purposes, which is very vague, and it could mean anything. So this definition has been passed by the House of Representatives. It's not law yet because it has to go through the Senate. They will probably pass it, and President Biden will probably rubber stamp it. But in the USA, you do have a final line of defense against these attacks on free speech. And this is an egregious attack of free speech, which I will explain later. You do have the Supreme Court, and hopefully there are enough members of the Supreme Court who are actually American constitutionalists rather than cultural Marxists on the left or neocons, iocons on the that side of the right, which is not truly conservative and conserving free speech. Now, this is a very, very dangerous piece of legislation. It has been under constant criticism for the last day or so since it has been passed, and quite rightly so. The IHRA's definition of anti-Semitism has 11 clauses in it, and I'm not going to read them all out, but some of the specific things that this will make criminal as it is now being adopted into US federal law would be questioning the Holocaust. Now, people have different opinions on the Holocaust. Everyone is taught in school that there was a Holocaust and 6 million Jews died. Some people question that, and everyone has the right to question something which they are presented with as a piece of information. That should be part of what is allowed in free speech. But this definition says, denying the fact, scope, mechanisms, e.g. gas chambers, or intentionality of the genocide of the Jewish people at the hands of National Socialist Germany and its supporters and accomplices during World War II is anti-Semitic, and therefore, if it's adopted into law, would be criminal. Some countries in Europe, notably Germany and Austria, also already have Holocaust denial laws. You can get up to 4 years in prison for saying you don't agree with the Holocaust. Yeah, whether that's right or wrong, as I said, everyone should have the right to do that. It is absolutely draconian that people can get sent to prison just for expressing an opinion which some people don't like. Also, if you say that some Jews have a prime loyalty to Israel rather than their own country, whether that's the USA, obviously in the case of the USA, or any other country around the world, that is also deemed to be anti-Semitic. And if that's brought into law, you will be a criminal for suggesting perhaps Antony Blinken, the Secretary of State, who has dual US-Israel nationality, has a prime loyalty to Israel. It's a absolutely legitimate question to ask. But if you ask that question now, if you state you think that, you may end up in prison if this goes through the Senate and so on. Also, quite disturbingly, quoting from the Bible, the Jews in the first century were responsible for killing Jesus. It will also be deemed to be anti-Semitic, but that's absolutely a fact. So therefore, now reading some verses out of the Bible, which pastors and vicars and priests and preachers do every week in church, could now be deemed to be anti-Semitic and get you put in prison. And also saying that the Jews have, or Jews as a collective, have control or significant power in the economy or politics or entertainment or the media, is also deemed to be anti-Semitic, even though it seems apparently to be true here, because there are groups such as the ADL and so on, which would love to get this law in place in the USA. Obviously, the International Holocaust Remembrance Association itself obviously has an incredible amount of power to get something like this, their own definition, brought into law in the United States. If you say, well, because of this, they have a lot of power, which is obviously true, that itself will be deemed to be anti-Semitic and could cause you to become a criminal. The whole thing is absolutely nonsense, but it's happening. And it's happening in lockstep around the world. It's one of the latest things that is happening in lots of different areas. Our freedoms are under attack, not necessarily from accusations of anti-Semitism like this is, but we've seen things going on over the last 4 years in lockstep together to take away our freedoms, whether it's lockdowns, coerced injections and digital identities and transgenderism coming through. This seems to be the latest thing to take away freedom to express your opinions on a certain topic or a certain area of society and national conversation. It should have been thrown out, but it was voted through 320 to 91. I hope the Supreme Court overturns this, and I hope that people in the United Kingdom and other countries around the West have got enough brain power to see that this is an egregious attack on our freedom of speech, and it should never be allowed into law.